Search and rescue dogs are trained to follow human scent through any terrain, any weather condition. In certified SAR operations, they maintain a 95% success rate finding lost hikers. That's industry standard across the United States. That's what handlers expect when they deploy with their dogs. A German Shepherd can detect human scent from a quarter-mile away. A Bloodhound can follow a trail that's 3 days old. These animals are professional search tools, trained for years, tested rigorously, certified by national organizations. When a hiker goes missing, the dogs find them, almost always. But in certain areas of the White Mountains, that success rate drops to 0, not low, not reduced, 0. The dogs find nothing. They track to a certain point, stop, and refuse to continue. And what's worse, what SAR coordinators don't discuss publicly, is that the dogs don't just fail to find the missing, they refuse to try. Trained professional animals with hundreds of successful searches suddenly behaving like they've encountered something their training never prepared them for. There are 7 documented zones across New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine where this happens. Specific coordinates, specific areas. Search and rescue teams have mapped them quietly over the last 8 years. They don't publicize the locations, don't mark them on official maps. But handlers know. When a missing person's last known position falls within one of these zones, experienced handlers feel their stomach drop. Because they know what's coming. They know their dogs won't work. And they know the missing person probably won't be found. A K9 Saudi Riles handler named Michael Torres has worked search and rescue for 15 years. He's deployed on over 200 searches with his German Shepherd, Ranger, a decorated SAR veteran with dozens of successful finds. Michael describes the first time he encountered one of the dead zones. It was October 3 years ago. A day hiker had been reported missing on the trails near Mount Moosilauke. Male, mid-30s, experienced hiker, didn't return to the trailhead by dark. His car was still in the parking lot. He'd signed the trail register that morning, indicating his route. Standard search parameters. Michael and Ranger deployed at first light. Ranger picked up the scent immediately at the trailhead. Strong track, fresh trail, textbook search. The dog moved confidently up the hiking path, nose to ground, working methodically. For the first 2 miles, everything was normal. Ranger was in his element, doing what he'd been trained to do. Michael followed, watching his dog's body language, reading the signals that told him the track was good. Then, about 2.5 miles in, Ranger stopped. Not a gradual slowing. A complete stop. The dog's head came up, his ears went back, and he took 3 steps backward, away from the trail ahead. Michael had never seen his dog do that. Ranger was fearless. He'd tracked through thunderstorms, through dense brush, across rivers. He'd never refused to work. Michael gave the command to continue. Ranger looked at him, whined, and took another step back. Michael approached the spot where Ranger had stopped. There was nothing visible, no cliff edge, no dangerous terrain, no obvious hazard, just trail continuing into the forest. He couldn't see anything that would cause his dog to react this way. He checked Ranger over, thinking maybe the dog had been injured. No signs of pain, no limping. Ranger was physically fine. He just wouldn't move forward. Michael tried everything. Different commands, encouragement, even tried to lead Ranger forward on the leash. The dog planted his feet and pulled backward, whining continuously. After 20 minutes of trying, Michael radioed base. Reported that his dog was refusing to work. Requested a second K9 team. 2 hours later, another handler arrived with a bloodhound named Scout. Fresh dog, different breed, different training background. Scout picked up the scent at the trailhead and tracked confidently up the same path. Michael watched from a distance, curious to see if Scout would react at the same location. At almost the exact spot where Ranger had stopped, Scout's behavior changed. The Bloodhound's confident tracking gait faltered. Her head came up. She circled once, twice, then sat down and refused to move. The handler tried to encourage her forward. Scout backed away, whining, exhibiting the same behavior Ranger had shown. Two professional search dogs, different breeds, different handlers, identical refusal at the same location. The search coordinator made a decision. They'd continue with a human ground team. Grid search, no dogs. It took them 3 days to search the area beyond the point where the dogs had stopped. They never found the missing hiker. He's still listed as missing. Last known position: approximately 2.5 miles up the Moosilauke Trail, the exact point where both dogs refused to continue. Michael took Ranger to a vet the next day, concerned about the unusual behavior. The vet found nothing wrong, no physical issues, no signs of illness or injury. And when Michael deployed with Ranger on a different search 2 days later, the dog worked perfectly, confident, focused, successful find. Whatever had caused Ranger to refuse at that location was specific to that place, not the dog, the place. That's when Michael started asking other handlers if they'd experienced similar incidents, and that's when he learned about the pattern. AK-9 Saudi Rial's coordinator, who requested anonymity, agreed to discuss the phenomenon. She's been coordinating search dog operations for over 20 years, working with dozens of handlers across 3 states. She estimates she's overseen more than 500 searches. And she's documented 23 separate incidents where certified search dogs have refused to work in specific locations. The pattern is consistent. The dogs track normally up to a certain point. Then their behavior changes dramatically. Some stop and back away, like Ranger did. Others become agitated, whining or barking. A few have tried to pull their handlers in the opposite direction, away from the search area. But all of them refuse to continue forward into what the coordinator calls the dead zones. What makes these incidents particularly disturbing is what happens when handlers force their dogs to continue, because some have tried. When a person is missing, when time is critical, some handlers have pushed their dogs forward despite the obvious distress. And what the dogs do in those zones defies everything handlers understand about scent tracking. A handler named Sarah Chen describes an incident from 18 months ago. She was working with her Bloodhound, Atlas, searching for a missing teenager in the White Mountain National Forest. The girl had been gone for 36 hours. Weather was deteriorating. The family was desperate. Sarah and Atlas were part of a 3-dog team deployed to search a specific sector. Atlas picked up the scent and tracked confidently for about a mile. Then his behavior changed. He started slowing down, pausing every few feet, looking around as if confused. Sarah recognized the signs from stories she'd heard from other handlers, but the situation was critical. The missing girl was young. Weather was turning. Sarah made the decision to push forward. She gave Atlas the command to continue. The dog moved forward reluctantly, stopping every 10 feet, whining. His tracking pattern became erratic. Instead of following a linear trail, Atlas started moving in a curve. Then, a circle. Sarah watched as her dog began tracking in a perfect circle, about 30 feet in diameter, nose to the ground, following scent. Atlas completed the circle and started a second loop. Same path, same circular route. Sarah stopped him and tried to redirect, encouraging him to track in a straight line, to follow the scent to its source. Atlas tried. He moved forward a few feet, then curved back into the circular pattern, as if the scent itself was circular, as if there was no source point, just a ring of scent suspended in the forest. 2 other dogs were working the same area. Sarah could see them through the trees. Both dogs were also tracking in circles. 3 different dogs, 3 different starting points, all moving in circular patterns. The circles overlapped. The dogs crossed each other's paths, but each stayed locked in their own loop, following scent that seemed to have no origin. Sarah's training told her this was impossible, Scent disperses from a source. It creates a gradient. Stronger near the source, weaker farther away. Dogs follow that gradient to the source. But Atlas was tracking as if the scent had the same strength everywhere on the circle. As if the source was the entire circle itself. Or as if the missing person was somehow distributed around the circle instead of located at a single point. After 45 minutes of circular tracking, Sarah called Atlas off. The dog was exhausted and distressed. The other handlers made the same decision. All 3 dogs were pulled from the search. A ground team continued without dogs. They searched for 3 more days. The missing teenager was never found. Atlas wouldn't work for 3 weeks after that search. Sarah would take him to training sessions, give him practice tracks, and the dog would start the track, then stop and look at her as if asking to be released. She eventually took him to a veterinary behaviorist, concerned that something had broken in her dog's psychology. The behaviorist found no physical cause, but noted that Atlas showed signs of anxiety when asked to track. The dog had lost confidence in his own nose. It took months of careful retraining before Atlas would work searches again, and Sarah reports that even now, 2 years later, if Atlas's body language suggests he doesn't want to continue on a track, she doesn't push him. She's learned to trust that her dog senses something she can't, something that makes the scent data unreliable, something that makes searching dangerous or futile or both. The SAR coordinator explains what she believes is happening in these zones, at least from a scent tracking perspective. Dogs don't just smell scent the way humans think of smelling. They process 300 million scent receptors compared to a human's 5 million. They can detect individual scent molecules and track them to their source with extraordinary precision. When a dog tracks, it's following a scent cone, a 3-dimensional gradient of scent particles dispersed from the source. In normal conditions, this works flawlessly. The scent is stronger near the person, weaker farther away. The dog follows the gradient upward towards stronger concentration. The dog's brain processes this information and creates a mental map. The source is this direction, this distance. The dog moves confidently toward the source. But in the dead zones, that gradient doesn't exist. The handlers who've worked these areas report that their dogs behave as if the scent is coming from all directions simultaneously, not dispersed outward from a point. Dispersed inward or outward, or in all directions at once, the scent has no source, no origin point. It just exists, equally strong across an entire area. One handler described it as scent that's been pressed flat. Another said it was like the person's smell had been turned into wallpaper and pasted over the whole forest. The SAR coordinator uses a different analogy. She says it's as if the missing person's molecules have been dispersed throughout the space instead of concentrated in a single body. As if they're there, but everywhere, and nowhere specifically. The coordinator shows GPS tracking logs from several searches in dead zones. The data is disturbing. In one case, a dog tracked in perfect circles for 6 hours. The GPS log shows 9 complete circles, each approximately 40 feet in diameter, each taking about 40 minutes to complete. The dog never deviated from the circular path. The handler eventually had to physically remove the dog from the area because the animal wouldn't stop tracking the circular scent pattern. In another case, 3 dogs working independently all converged on the same location, then began tracking in concentric circles. The GPS logs show 3 rings, like a target, all centered on the same empty point. The dogs tracked simultaneously for 2 hours. No missing person was found at the center. No missing person was found anywhere. But 3 trained dogs all agreed that scent was concentrated in a circular pattern around a specific empty location. The coordinator has mapped all 23 incidents where dogs refused to work or exhibited circular tracking behavior. The dead zones are scattered across 3 states, but they share certain characteristics. All are between 800 and 200 feet in elevation. All have dense canopy cover. All are within 2 miles of a water source. All are on north-facing slopes. But thousands of locations match those criteria without any issues. Dogs work successfully in similar terrain all the time. It's not the geography that causes the problem. It's something specific to those exact locations. Something that affects how scent disperses, how reality organizes itself, how missing people exist in space. The pattern of dog refusal has been documented for 8 years now. In that time, 23 missing person searches have involved dogs refusing to work or exhibiting impossible tracking behavior in these zones. Of those 23 cases, only 3 people were ever found. All 3 were located outside the dead zones, miles from their last known positions, disoriented and confused, with no memory of how they'd traveled that distance. The other 20 people remain missing. Their last known positions all fall within the mapped dead zones. Extensive ground searches were conducted after the dogs failed. Grid patterns, helicopters, thermal imaging, cadaver dogs deployed weeks later when scent would have dissipated. Nothing. It's not that the people aren't there. It's that they can't be found using conventional search methods. They exist somewhere in those zones, but not in a way that allows discovery. The effect on the dogs themselves is another concern. Several handlers report that their dogs changed after working dead zone searches. Not just refusing to work, personality changes. Confident dogs becoming anxious, social dogs becoming withdrawn. One handler describes her Labrador, previously friendly and outgoing, becoming fearful of forests. The dog would work searches in urban areas, in fields, near water, but refused to enter wooded areas at all, as if the experience in the dead zone had taught the dog that forests contained something dangerous. Another handler's German Shepherd developed what the vet called separation anxiety, but only when the handler was preparing for a search. The dog would become agitated whenever the handler gathered SAR equipment, would follow the handler constantly in the days before a deployment, would whine and pace when left at home. The dog had worked dozens of searches before encountering a dead zone. After that single incident, something changed in the dog's understanding of what searches mean. Some handlers have retired their dogs early after dead zone incidents. Not because the dogs couldn't work, but because the handlers felt it was unfair to ask the dogs to continue. The dogs had encountered something that violated their understanding of how the world works, how scent works, how tracking works. And continuing to deploy them felt like asking them to work in conditions that their training hadn't prepared them for. One handler put it this way: Ranger is trained to find people. He's trained to follow scent to a person. But in that zone, there was no person to find. There was just scent. Scent that didn't lead anywhere. Scent that existed without a source. How do you train a dog to track something that defies the physics of tracking? You can't. So Ranger made the smart decision. He stopped. He said, "This isn't right. I can't work here. We need to leave." And I should have listened to him immediately. The SAR coordinator has implemented an unofficial protocol. If a missing person's last known position falls within one of the mapped dead zones, she notifies handlers before deployment, gives them the option to decline. Most experienced handlers will still deploy, hoping their dog will be the exception, but they go in prepared for their dog to refuse. And they've agreed among themselves not to push their dogs if refusal occurs. The missing person's life is critical, but so is the dog's well-being. And after 8 years of dead zone searches, the handlers have learned a difficult truth. Pushing the dogs doesn't help. The missing person still isn't found. And the dog is traumatized. There's an ongoing debate in the SAR community about whether to publicize the dead zones. Some believe hikers should be warned. If certain areas have this effect on scent, if people who go missing there are never found, shouldn't the public know? Shouldn't there be closures or warnings or some acknowledgement that these places are different? Others argue that publicizing the information would cause panic, would lead to sensationalized stories. would undermine public confidence in search and rescue operations, and wouldn't necessarily prevent people from going missing, because the zones don't announce themselves. There are no visible markers. No atmospheric changes that humans can detect. You only know you're in a dead zone when the dogs refuse to work. By then, if you're the missing person, it's already too late. The coordinator believes the zones are expanding, not in size, but in number. 8 years ago, there were 3 mapped locations where dogs consistently refused to work. Now there are 7. She's received reports from handlers in other states, Colorado, Washington, North Carolina, describing similar incidents. Dogs refusing to work in specific locations, circular tracking patterns, missing people never found. If the pattern is spreading, if more zones are appearing, that suggests something systematic is happening, something that affects how certain spaces interact with human scent, how they interact with human presence. One handler offered a theory that the coordinator finds compelling. He suggests that the zones aren't causing people to disappear. The zones are places where people who are in the process of disappearing become briefly detectable, like a person standing in a doorway between 2 rooms. For a moment, they're in both rooms, or neither room. They're in transition, and while they're in that transitional state, they leave scent. But the scent doesn't follow normal rules, because the person isn't following normal rules. They're not entirely present in this reality anymore. They're dispersed, spread out, existing in multiple states or locations simultaneously. That would explain the circular tracking. The dogs are following scent that exists in a ring because the person exists as a ring, or exists in multiple positions around a central point, or exists in a probability cloud rather than a single location. The dogs can smell them, can detect their presence, but can't track them to a specific point, because there is no specific point. There's just a zone where the person is partially present in multiple places at once. It's a disturbing theory, and it raises disturbing questions. If the missing people are in some transitional state, dispersed across space, are they aware? Are they conscious? Are they experiencing time? Are they in pain? Or have they transitioned fully into whatever comes after, and the scent zones are just echoes of their last moments in this reality? The handlers don't know. The coordinator doesn't know. The dogs can't tell them, but the dogs know something. The dogs sense something in those zones that makes them refuse to enter, makes them back away, makes them track in circles when forced to work. The dog's behavior is consistent, instinctive, and unambiguous. They're saying, this place is wrong. The scent here doesn't make sense. The person you're looking for isn't here in a way I can find them. We should leave. And after 8 years of dead zone searches, after 20 missing people never found, after multiple dogs traumatized or retired early, the handlers are starting to agree. The dogs are smarter than the humans. The dogs know not to go into those zones, and maybe humans should listen. The SAR coordinator ends the interview with a warning. If you're hiking in the White Mountains, in certain areas of Vermont, in specific elevations of Maine, and you see a search and rescue team working, and the dog suddenly stops and refuses to continue, and the handler looks concerned and starts backing away, pay attention to where that happened. Mark that location mentally. And in the future, don't go there. Because if professional search dogs trained to find missing people refuse to enter an area, that's a sign. That's a warning. That place isn't safe. Not in a way you can see or understand, but in a way that affects reality itself, affects how things exist in space, affects whether people who go missing can ever be found. The dogs know. They've always known. Humans are just starting to learn.